Hello, it's Tuesday. It's an election day in Nebraska, Maryland, and West Virginia. Voters are casting votes in the presidential primaries, sure, but also in Senate races and House races and for local officials all up and down their state ballots. Because it's election day, on the main show, we shared a conversation with Kathy Boockvar, former Secretary of State of Pennsylvania. Kathy spends every day thinking about election security. And in some ways, it's a scary discussion because it is so overwhelming to think about all of the threats to free and fair elections in our democratic society. But when you talk to someone like Kathy, who is just doing the work every single day to make our system stronger and more resilient, you cannot help but be inspired. I had not planned for more to say to tie so directly to the topic of elections today, but we are separately working on a Pride Month series for you next month. And as part of that, we've reached out to a few people that we've spoken with before, including Rosemary Ketchum. We first talked with Rosemary in June of 2020 because she was the first out transgender person to hold elected office in West Virginia. So she joined us then to talk about her experience running for city council in Wheeling, which is an Appalachian city of about 30,000 people. We wanted to catch up with Rosemary and hear how the last 4 years have gone and what she's up to next. And we learned that Rosemary is on the ballot today. There is a very real threat environment around how we treat and talk about and legally recognize transgender people. And when you talk to someone like Rosemary, who is just doing the work every single day to make her community stronger and more resilient, you cannot help but be inspired. So today there's more to say about local government at its absolute finest with council member and mayoral candidate Rosemary Ketchum. So thrilled to be here with Rosemary Ketchum again, a day before a very important election in your life. How are you?
Oh my gosh. Yes, Beth. We are about 24 hours away from Election Day, May 14th here in the city of Wheeling. I feel good. I mean, we are knocking thousands of doors. We're talking to thousands of voters. We had a honk and wave this morning. I went to the thrift store. That's like my secret self-care. And everybody's like, we're so excited. So yes, we feel very good. We feel like we've put in the work, and obviously the voters will let us know tomorrow.
Okay, well, I want to get to the major issues in this campaign, but first, can we backtrack a little bit? Because it's been 4 years since the last time we talked. So yeah. I want to hear about your accomplishments on the city council. I know you've done work on housing. I know the city council has banned conversion therapy, but I am also certain that you've done a lot that the national press is not capturing in their stories about you. So tell me what you're really proud of from this past 4 years.
Thank you. I so appreciate the question. In 2019, 2020, when we ran our first campaign, we ran an incredibly grassroots campaign focused on housing, affordability, public transit, infrastructure. We focused on sidewalks and blight, which is one of the issues that seriously impacts my neighborhoods, homelessness, which is continuing to be a struggle, not just for our city, but for cities across the nation. And I remember so clearly getting elected and feeling like if I can just get 2 or 3 really good, thoughtful policies passed, this will have been worth it. And looking back, that was such a naive and maybe even pessimistic view, because in these past 4 years, we have been able to pass hundreds of pieces of really influential, impactful pieces of legislation that change the course of lives here in the city of Wheeling every day. So you mentioned one of the issues that we've been working on, which is inclusivity. We've banned conversion therapy. Wheeling was the first city in the state and continues to be the only city in the state that has addressed and acknowledged racism as a public health crisis and something that is a kind of all hands on deck scenario. We've also been able to do some incredible things around economic development and urban development. One of my favorite things is public administration, as well as kind of urban design. If you're not following Everyday Engineering on TikTok, they are incredible. Just the kind of perception of how we build cities, and that kind of built environments inform behavior. And so we've been able to do some really incredible things with our infrastructure. We have a $17+ million streetscape happening in our city that I'm very proud of. Something else that is quite dire here in the state of West Virginia is our population decline. In 2020, West Virginia experienced the sharpest population decline of any state in America. That means more people left West Virginia or passed away in our state, and resulted in that sharpest population decline. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is engage young people and not just convince them or threaten them to stay in the state, but give them a reason to live here, give them a reason to be proud and to have their values reflected. One of the things that we've been able to pass is a youth city council, so that kids can help inform policy, because they shouldn't have to wait until they're 25 or 35 to get involved in government. I think that should happen as soon as possible. And that's how we maintain a healthy and strong democracy. And so those are a couple of the things that we've been working on, in addition to homeowner assistance programs and expanding our public transit, and all kinds of other fun things.
That's amazing. I would love to know, I know that you went into your campaign the first time with this sensibility that people don't want to do culture war stuff. They care about their roads, and they care about their bridges, and they care about these places where they are every single day. It sounds like your experience has borne that out. Is that still what you found?
It has never been more true. Exactly. Obviously, folks want a city that feels safe, that feels inclusive, that feels accepting. But the reality is they also want a city that's affordable. They also want a city that's walkable. They also want a city that's navigable in public transit. And we can, build an inclusive city, but if it's not inclusive in affordability or transit or mobility or any of these other things that we're talking about, then we're just using talking points from a national perspective. And so you're totally right. I've learned that at the local level, people are interested in quality of life. Like, they're invested here. They're taxpayers. They are, paying a lot of money in taxes to live in our cities, not just in Wheeling, but across the state. We want to make sure that we're prudent stewards of those funds, and that we're showing people how those funds are being spent. And so Parks and Recreation has been one of the biggest issues that we've been able to work on, not just improving our playgrounds, but addressing years-long disinvestment in our infrastructure. One of the fun things, we have tennis courts in almost every neighborhood in our city. Wheeling has more tennis courts than almost any other city in West Virginia, which is exciting. Pickleball is now becoming some craze that folks are interested in. And we've made it a point to repair these playgrounds and these tennis courts so that folks can feel like they don't have to have a gym membership, or they don't have to travel out of state or out of city to experience recreation. They can do it in their own backyard. So all of those things are hyper local and are really about local grassroots quality of life issues. And frankly, I think that's what separates local elected officials from national elected officials. At the national level, like, I can't watch television anymore. I can't watch YouTube ads anymore because the content is so irrelevant and nonsensical and just not thoughtful. Particularly, it's not thoughtful surrounding the issues that everyday Americans or everyday West Virginians are facing. And so I'm only kind of re-inspired by the work when I'm talking to my fellow local electeds who are like, yeah, one day I'm talking about potholes. The next I'm talking about civil rights. The next day I'm talking about building permits. And then the very next day I'm talking about, whether somebody can have ducks in their backyard. Like, that's the beauty of politics, and something I'm so grateful to be a part of.
One of the heated issues in my community for local electives has been keeping the community pool open. And to your point about recreation and quality of life, it's so true. So tell me, in your mayoral race, what issues have bubbled up as like, these are the top things on voters' minds, or these are the top things that I want to do as mayor that maybe I haven't been able to touch yet from my city council position?
Yes. So throughout my 4 years on city council, I had a front row seat to the issues and challenges that we've been working on for the past 30+ years. But I've also been able to engage folks in a series of office hours. So most kind of local electeds in America do not actually have a physical office. They don't have an address. They don't have a staff. It is usually just them doing their best to get the work done. And It's difficult because you don't have the rest of that support infrastructure around you to really engage folks. And something that we've done is institute monthly office hours where I just go to a local food market or farmer's market or store and just like set up shop and let folks come and chat with me, kind of meeting voters where they are. And that has really tuned me into some issues that might not have been on my mind or weren't priorities that we've been able to kind of inject into this mayor's race. And so a couple of the kind of broad issues that we're working on are around economic development and class, wanting to ensure that we are raising our average income here in the city of Wheeling, that we are encouraging small businesses and industry to open up. One of the things that we know is true is that when there's a thriving local economy, wages have the ability to increase and people have more financial mobility. That's something that we've been able to do. And we are able to address it in a couple interesting ways. Something that I'm very proud of in the policy space is a project that we've created called the Upper Floor Development Program. Historically, old buildings have not been able to develop their top floors because of kind of prohibitive fire suppression code and cost. We want to keep people safe. We don't want to reduce, fire suppression or fire code, but we also have a ton of vacant space that needs to be occupied. The city was able to create a program where property owners, business owners can leverage $250,000 to get that fire suppression system completed. That is not a sexy issue. That is not one that people are excited to talk about, but that's just the nuts and bolts of practical economic development and how we kind of unlock the potential of some of these spaces. And so economic development has been a kind of key tenet of this campaign. I also represent our largest small business district, and those folks have been impacted by COVID, impacted by our current infrastructure repairs through our streetscape, which has been incredible, but also somewhat frustrating. And then we had a hospital close in the middle of all this as well. And so that was 600 employees that no longer were shopping at these businesses. So that's been a real focus. I mentioned before youth retention and youth engagement. Population decline is a huge issue here, but when somebody turns 18 here in the city of Wheeling, they get to make a choice. Do I stay here? Do I grow here? Do I go someplace else? And for the longest time, I, would convince 18-year-olds, you have to stay, you must stay. I don't do that anymore. I say, you should explore, you should go see the world, but you should feel compelled to bring that experience, that knowledge, that optimism, that open mind back to our city to build something better, to build something stronger. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with schools, with students, with young people who are finally feeling a little bit of optimism and like the door is open for them to get involved. One of the other issues, of course, that voters have given to me, but is just very clear, is homelessness. So the city passed a ban on homeless encampments about 3 months ago. I was only one of 2 no votes on this ban. The rest of city council did vote for it. My mayor and I were the only ones in opposition. Not because we don't believe that this is a huge challenge that needs addressed. We just believe in smart policy and not attacking the most vulnerable people in our community, the most vulnerable people. And it just so happened to be on the coldest day of our winter in January, February. So, we are working tirelessly to make sure that we're addressing this both in a public safety way, but also in the most humane way possible. Those are issues that a mayor can focus on, that a council can focus on. But more than anything, those are issues that we need our whole community behind us. Because at the end of the day, we call ourselves the friendly city. Sometimes it's more aspirational than it is a reality. But on these issues in particular, we need all hands on deck. And I feel like our campaign has been able to do that.
So despite the extremely local nature of your work, you are covered nationally as a symbolic and historic figure. And I know that that's not what you set out to do, that you say all the time, you're there to serve your community. But I wonder how it affects your relationship with your other elected officials, how it's affected the mayor's race. Like, what's it like to be focused both on this very particular place and also have the world watching you at moments in time?
Well, I mean, it's a question I've not been asked in this way before. How has it impacted my relationships? And it's such a kind of prescient question because it has, both in the positive and the negative. So I get, ribbed sometimes in a very jovial, fun way by other folks who've been like, oh gosh, is this going to be on CNN tomorrow? And sometimes it is. And then on other times, I worry that the national lens distracts voters or distracts folks from the actual issues, because oftentimes the national take on our race is that I'm transgender, or that we're making history, or that there's a kind of social movement happening, which is potentially all true. But it has the potential to pivot from actually the things that we're working on: infrastructure, homelessness, opioid addiction, those kinds of things. And so, I'm I kind of a freshman elected official with 4 years under my belt. I've had 15 years of public service experience. And yet, every time I do a national interview, I kind of worry that, gosh, is this going to be the one that convinces voters that I'm only ever interested in taking those national calls, right? And that's been something I've been, accused of in the past. And, I will say, to the voters' credit, this isn't normal, right? Like, it isn't normal for your local city council member in a city of less than 30,000 to do an interview on MSNBC. That's not typical. And so being able to lead while representing my city at a national level, and also just making sure the issues are addressed, is a challenge, but is the most important thing that we can do. And I try to remind folks that might give me a little, ribbing on it, that having a national lens on Wheeling is incredibly positive, right? Because it gives us the opportunity to kind of change perception and to introduce to the nation not just who West Virginians are, but who people in my city, who lives here. And I think, there is this national stereotype and stigma about people in West Virginia, and we've heard all of the jokes and all of the phrases. But I have never felt more optimistic about the future of our state and the future of this city. And part of that is because our stories are finally being told, and people are finally understanding who exactly lives here and why we love our state so much.
I can imagine it's very complicated. I grew up in a very small town in Western Kentucky, and outside attention is exactly a blessing and a curse, I'm sure, every day. Well, I want to ask you, as we wrap up here, we're talking right ahead of Pride Month, and I want to know in 2024 what that means to you. I would think it's different every year. So what does that mean to you in 2024?
Yeah. So if we get elected tomorrow, we will be inaugurated during Pride Month, which is very exciting. It does change every single year, because our politics change every year. The people who are running for office change. But the people in our community, in my perspective, every single election year, every single year that we host a Pride event, or that it's acknowledged at the city level, it only gets better. People are feeling far more comfortable sharing their stories. And I get emails every day. I got a letter in the mail today, which is so sweet, from kids or grandparents who say, hey, I never really understood the LGBTQ community or transgender people, but my grandkids saw you on television and decided to come out to me. And we've had a really, really great conversation. And I feel like our relationship is in a better place. Like, those stories, I try not to even let it get to me in that way. But that is the power of representation, not just, anywhere, but in a place like West Virginia, who, frankly, in many ways has felt culturally behind the rest of the nation. Those opportunities to kind of share stories and narratives and different perspectives on what it means to be Appalachian are so critical. And so in 2024, we're going to have a Pride Festival. We're giving awards out to people who have done incredible work in our community. And not just folks who are, focused on LGBTQ advocacy, but folks who are interested in building a friendlier city, whatever that means to you, whether that's involving LGBTQ issues, or folks experiencing mental illness or addiction, folks who experience a disability. Like, we want our city to be the friendliest it can be. And so, yes, it is only getting better. And I feel like every election year, despite what happens at a national level, local communities are stronger.
What's your advice to people listening to this who think that is great, and God, I wish I lived there, and I wish I felt that optimism, but I'm staring down a presidential election and I know how ugly it gets, and I'm feeling down?
I would say, I wish you lived here too. Please move to Wheeling, West Virginia. We are engaging in a population recruitment campaign. We've got so many incredible things and amenities here. But for folks who don't have the ability to move or the ability to get involved in their local government, although there are plenty of opportunities, it is tough and it is dire. And I'm always leading into kind of optimism, and I try not to engage in like toxic positivity because it's not helpful. I'm scared too. What happens at the national level is frightening. The fact that we're still having conversations about Nazis, that we're still having conversations about genocide in 2024. I mean, it's so disheartening. And as people with a platform, it is our responsibility to speak out, even if it's a small platform. And so that's something that we're proud to do. But for folks who do feel like, is this the place for me? Not just like their state, but this country. I empathize with that, in part because when you're not involved, you really feel directionless. So my advice is to be involved, join a commission, join a board, join a committee. And it doesn't have to be focused on something government activity. It can be arts and culture. It can be music. But having a say in the way that your community is run is not just practical. It is also really good for your mental health. And it helps you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. It isn't easy, I'll say that much. But as a person in the reddest state in America, who is progressive, who is LGBTQ, who is openly trans, I have been invited into almost every board, commission, and committee that I can think of, and we've been able to do really good work. And so it's not to say that the barrier of entry is low everywhere, but we need your help. That's my advice, is that we need your help, and we hope that you do get involved.
You know, I read an article about you this morning, and someone said, if every community had 6 Rosemarys, everyone would be better off.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought that seems so true. And also, I bet they do, right? It's just that people haven't come forward yet. So I love that advice and call to action.
Yes, nothing that I am doing is magical or innovative or just like brand new. This is just very basic, practical community organizing work. And I just happen to really, really love it. And so, yes, every single community has people who are doing this similar work. And if you don't know those folks, you got to find them, right? That's what I did. I found the 6 other Rosemarys in my community when I was starting out. And I met with them. I spoke with them. I kind of like, their energy was contagious. And without those mentors, frankly, I would not be here right now. So yes, those folks exist, and they need just as much as you need their energy and support, they probably need it from you too. In times of national crisis and turmoil, the most important thing you can do is find your community and find your people. And that's something that I did 4 years ago. That's something I'm doing today. And hopefully tomorrow, election day, folks will feel like they're finding their community here in the city.
Well, I could talk to you all day, but you've got stuff to do. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Good luck. I hope that we get to celebrate with you tomorrow. I'll be watching the Wheeling mayoral race from Union, Kentucky, and cheering you on.
Thank you, Beth. You're the best.
Thank you so much to Rosemary for being here today. We will certainly give you an update on the outcome of this race. I'll be back with you here tomorrow. Until then, everybody have the best day available to you.